Maybe one day?
Maybe one day, just not now.
No, 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 no. No. But this is what you want?
Yeah, this is my decision. This is what I'm gonna do. And this nightmare has to be over for everybody.
No. You have to remember, we're strong.
I know. This is my decision, though.
But don't ever confess to something you didn't do.
I know, but this is my decision, though. This is all me, okay? I was not pressured into anything. This is my decision.
Okay. I've been the service on Sunday. Oh my gosh, it was.
If you believe every victim deserves to be remembered and every truth deserves to be told, subscribe to the Crime Narrator. These stories live on because you're here to hear them.
His underwear and a jar of petroleum jelly were found inside another inmate's cell. A disciplinary report was filed. That is what 7 years of a life sentence looks like. For the man who told a television camera he just wanted his family back.
Ask questions, but like, I want them wherever they're at. Like, I have no inclination of where they're at right now. Like, I've exhausted like every friend that I know of, and every friend that I have has called friends that Shanann has that maybe I didn't know about, and it's just like it's vanished. Like, she's not. Like, when I got home yesterday, it was like a ghost town. Like, she wasn't here. Kids weren't here. I have no idea like where they went, and it's just earth-shattering. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
Chris, when did you learn that they weren't here?
I guess, well, I texted her a few times, called her, I didn't get a response, which that was a little off. And then her friend Nicole showed up about a little afternoon. I could see it on the doorbell camera. And I was like, hey, what's going on? She said, I can't get a hold of Shanann. And
in his letters, he describes a life of prayer, reflection, and peace. He writes about Bible study, about God's grace, about the peace that surpasses all understanding. He tells women who write to him that he has found himself, that prison has brought him closer to God, that he is, his exact words, a new man. In the same period, he filed attempts to have his guilty plea reviewed. He told a source he was not sure he was in the right mind when he confessed. He blamed his affair partner for the murders of his wife and children. He compared his prison sentence to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. He received a disciplinary report. He is still writing simultaneously to dozens of women who each believe they have a unique connection with him. A man at peace does not behave like this. A man at peace does not need.
He had been inside for 3 years. 3 years of a cell. 3 years of silence. 3 years of living inside what he had done. And then he picked up the phone and told someone he could not live there anymore. The man who murdered his pregnant wife and smothered his daughters in the back of a truck was asking for sympathy. He says prison is destroying him. He says he cannot survive it, that the walls are closing in, that the isolation is unbearable. He says God sees him not as a sinner, but as his child. His daughter Bella said, "Daddy, no." He killed her anyway. And now he needs the world to know that he is suffering. To understand what Christopher Watts is saying from inside that prison, to understand why his words matter, and why they reveal something far darker than suffering, you first have to know who he was before the walls closed around him. Frederick, Colorado. Population just under 12,000. A quiet suburb north of Denver, where the streets are wide and the houses are neat, and the neighbors know each other's names. The kind of town that does not expect to find itself in a Netflix documentary. The kind of town that does not expect to become synonymous with one of the most shocking family murders in recent American history. Christopher Lee Watts was 33 years old in the summer of 2018. 6 feet 4 inches, quiet, reliable. A field operator for Anadarko Petroleum, the kind of employee who showed up on time, kept his head down, and generated 0 complaints. His neighbors would have described him the same way, easy, friendly, not the sort of man who caused trouble. His wife Shanann was 34. Vivid, social, relentlessly warm. She sold wellness products for Lavelle Thrive and used Facebook as her stage, documenting birthday cakes and Saturday mornings in the particular chaos of raising 2 small children, with a third on the way. She was 15 weeks pregnant, with a boy they had already named Nico. Their daughters, Bella Marie, 4 years old, Celeste Catherine, 3. Bella slept with a stuffed unicorn. Celeste wore tutus to breakfast without apology. From every Facebook post, every neighborhood wave, every family photo, this was the life that people worked their whole careers to build. But behind the filtered brightness of those videos, something had already fractured. Since late June of 2018, Chris Watts had been having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger. He had told her he was separated. He had told her the marriage was essentially over. He had begun researching houses, looking up divorce lawyers, building in his mind a future that did not include the woman sleeping in his bed or the daughters asleep down the hall. And at some point between those June nights and the early morning of August 13th, he made a decision that no divorce lawyer, no affair, no house hunting could explain. He decided to erase them. If you are new here, welcome to the Crime Narrator. This is a channel built for the stories that the world needs to hear, told with the detail they deserve. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now so you never miss what we cover next. And before we go any further, I want to know where in the world you are watching from tonight. Drop your country in the comments below, every single one. Let's see how far the Crime Narrator reaches. Sunday, August 12, 2018. Shanann had been away for several days on a business trip to Arizona for Lavelle Thrive. She landed back in Denver just after 1:45 in the morning on August 13th. A friend drove her home. The drive was quiet. Shanann had been unsettled all weekend, texting Chris more than usual, trying to read something, in the brevity of his responses, the clipped replies, the emotional distance she had been tracking for weeks. At 1:48 a.m., Shanann Watts walked through the front door of 2825 Saratoga Trail for the last time. Chris was awake. He met her in the entryway. They talked. It became an argument. Shanann pressed him on what she had been feeling, the coldness, the detachment, the sense that the man she had married had quietly left without going anywhere. She told him she knew something was wrong. He told her he wanted out of the marriage. She told him he would not be seeing his children. Christopher Watts strangled his pregnant wife to death in their bedroom. Shanann Watts, 34 years old, 15 weeks pregnant with Nico, was murdered in the early hours of August 13, 2018, in the home she had decorated, in the bedroom she had shared with a man she trusted with her life. He wrapped her body. He began moving it toward the stairs, and Bella woke up, 4 years old, clutching her blanket, standing in the hallway looking at her father pulling something wrapped in a sheet down the stairs. She asked what was wrong with Mommy. He told her Mommy was sick, that they were going to take her somewhere to feel better. He loaded both girls into his truck and drove 40 miles east through the dark to a remote Anadarko petroleum oil field, a site accessible only to employees. He dug a shallow grave. He buried Shanann. Bella asked, "Daddy, what are you doing to Mommy?" He went back to the truck. He took Celeste's blanket. He smothered his 3-year-old daughter in the back seat while her older sister sat beside her. He pushed Celeste's small body through an 8-inch opening in an oil storage tank. He returned to Bella. Her last words were, "Daddy, no." He killed her. He placed her body into a separate tank, feet from her sister. Then Christopher Watts drove home. He showered, and he texted Nicole Kessinger. By morning, nothing looked different from the outside. But Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson had been texting since early morning with no reply, which for Shanann, who documented her entire life in real time, was wrong. Nicole drove to the house, knocked, no answer. The car was in the driveway. Shanann's shoes were by the door. She called the police. Officers arrived to find Christopher Watts at the door. Calm, composed, not panicked, not shaking. He said he didn't know where Shanann was. He said she had taken the girls somewhere. He wasn't sure where. Later that same day, he stood on his front lawn in front of a Denver news camera. He looked directly into the lens. He appealed for his family to come home. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. If somebody has her, please bring her back. I need to see everybody. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring them back. He knew exactly where they were. He had put them there himself. While Shanann was classified as a missing person, while emergency alerts were issued and neighbors printed flyers, Chris Watts was FaceTiming Nicole Kessinger, talking about their future, talking about being free. On August 15th, investigators asked him to submit to a polygraph. He agreed. He failed. Placed in a room with his father Ronnie, he confessed, but constructed yet another lie. He said Shanann had killed the girls, that he had walked in, found them dead, and killed Shanann in rage. One last version where he could be the victim. The evidence dismantled it completely. On August 15th, 2018, Christopher Watts was arrested on 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of tampering with human remains, and 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy. The bodies of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were recovered from the Anadarko oil field that same evening. Stay with me right here, because what I am about to walk you through, the sentencing, the confession, and then what has been happening inside that prison ever since, is the part of this story that most people have never heard in full. Like this video for Shanann. Subscribe to the Crime Narrator if you haven't already, and drop your country in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to see every flag. November 6th, 2018, Christopher Watts stood in a Colorado courtroom and entered guilty pleas on all charges. There would be no trial. Shanann's family, her parents Frank and Sandra Ruzek, her brother Frank Jr., had made a specific and devastating request: do not pursue the death penalty. They could not endure years of hearings, retrials, and public reliving of every detail. They wanted it closed. Their mercy toward the man who killed their daughter and grandchildren is one of the most quietly wrenching details of this entire case. Judge Marcelo Kopkow sentenced Christopher Watts on November 19, 2018. Before he spoke the sentence, he addressed Watts directly. He told him these murders were, in his words, perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crimes he had seen in thousands of cases across his entire career. 5 life terms without the possibility of parole, 3 consecutive, 2 concurrent, 48 additional years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, the killing of Miko, who never drew a breath outside his mother's body, 36 more years for tampering with and disposing of the bodies. Christopher Watts kept his head down throughout the victim impact statements. He did not look at Shanann's family. He did not speak. On December 3, 2018, he was transferred to Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, moved out of Colorado after corrections officials confirmed he was a security risk. His notoriety and his crimes against children made him a target in any Colorado facility. The cell door closed, and the world moved on, or tried to, but Christopher Watts was not done talking. February 18, 2019, 6 months after sentencing, investigators traveled to Wisconsin and sat across from Christopher Watts for 5 hours. He claimed he had found God in prison. He said he was a changed man. He said he was finally ready to tell the whole truth. What he told them in that room rewrote the timeline of this case. He admitted for the first time that he alone had killed his daughters. Not Shanann, him, with his hands, in the back of a truck, while Bella sat next to her dying sister and watched. He described it with the kind of clinical flatness that investigators said was one of the most disturbing things they had ever encountered in an interview room. But buried inside the confession was something even more chilling. In a letter written from prison before the interview, describing the night of August 12th, he wrote that after he had finished putting the girls to bed, he had walked away from their rooms and said to himself, "That is the last time I am going to be tucking my babies in." Before Shanann landed, before the argument, before the moment he would later describe as a burst of rage, he had already said goodbye to his children. This was not a crime of passion. This was premeditated. The oil field access had been arranged. The logistics had been worked out. The decision had been made days, possibly weeks, before Shanann walked through that door. Forensic psychologist and author Lena Derhally, who studied this case in depth, confirmed that the pattern of evidence, the planning, the preparation, the emotional detachment, pointed in one unmistakable direction: a man who had decided his family had to go, and executed that decision with methodical precision. We are now going inside the prison, inside the letters, Inside, the conduct violations and the outburst and the words that shocked everyone who heard them. You will not want to miss this. Stay right here. And if you have not yet subscribed to the Crime Narrator, do it right now. This community deserves to grow. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country. I see every single one. Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, is not a place that accommodates comfort. The building itself carries a history that feels almost fitting for what it now holds. Before it became a correctional facility, the site operated as the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. It currently holds other notorious inmates, including Stephen Avery, serving life for the murder of Teresa Halbach, incarcerated just across the street at Waupun Correctional Institution. This is Christopher Watts' world now. Maximum security, cold, controlled, every movement tracked. According to the Wisconsin Department of Corrections, Watts is classified within general population, meaning he has access to the workout area once or twice per day on weekdays. He works as a custodian inside the facility. He attends Bible study. Otherwise, he keeps to himself. That last part is a survival instinct, not a choice. Larry Levine, director of Wall Street Prison Consultants and a former federal inmate, noted it plainly. Men convicted of crimes against children are the most hated people on the inside. In any facility, in any state, Watts is at the bottom of every prisoner hierarchy. Other inmates know who he is, they know what he did, and they express that knowledge in the most direct ways available to them. Reports confirm that by 2025 and 2026, Watts had lost most of his hair. He had put on significant weight. Sources who have tracked his appearance over the years describe a man who is physically deteriorating, someone who avoids eye contact with other inmates, who moves through the prison with the particular wariness of a man who knows he is always at risk. A source told People magazine in 2019 that Watts had nothing to do but think, that he thinks about what he did every single day, that he is tormented by his past and the mistakes he made. The word mistakes, not crimes, not murders, not the night he drove his daughters to an oil field in the dark and came home alone. Mistakes. That word is doing a great deal of work in that sentence, and it tells you something important about how Christopher Watts frames what he did. Even now, even 7 years in, even with 5 life sentences, keeping him in that cell for the rest of his life, Christopher Watts was not a model prisoner. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections confirmed to People magazine that Watts received 2 formal conduct reports during his incarceration, documented infractions that resulted in specific disciplinary consequences. The first came in 2020. The report cited unauthorized forms of communication and unauthorized transfer of property. As a result, Watts lost his phone privileges for 15 days and his canteen privileges for 30 days. Think about what that means. Unauthorized communication in a maximum security prison from a man serving 5 consecutive life sentences for murdering his family. He was not supposed to be in contact with certain people, and he found a way to do it anyway. The second conduct report arrived in 2021, this time disobeying orders and possession of miscellaneous contraband. He lost access to electronic devices for 10 days. 2 violations in 7 years may not sound dramatic, but in the context of a man who has been carefully managing his image from inside a cell ever since he arrived, 2 formal disciplinary actions tell you something. They tell you that Christopher Watts, even locked in a maximum security facility with no freedom and no platform, is still testing limits, still pushing boundaries, still operating as a man who believes the rules apply differently to him. The same instinct that allowed him to stand on his front lawn and look into a camera with dry eyes 2 days after murdering his family, that instinct did not disappear when the cell door closed. It just adapted. Here's what we know about the words Christopher Watts has spoken and written from inside Dodge Correctional, and why they reveal something far more disturbing than a man who is struggling. Sources who have tracked his communications from prison, along with investigators and legal analysts familiar with his case, have described a pattern that has intensified over the years. In the early days, he projected calm. He projected religious transformation. He gave the impression of a man who had accepted where he was. But the years have worn at that projection. By 2021 and 2022, the accounts began to shift. People close to the case described Watts as increasingly agitated, as someone who had begun to speak, to whoever would listen, about the unbearable nature of his confinement, about how the isolation was destroying him, about how he could not sustain the life he was living inside those walls. The phrase that circulated among those tracking this case, the outburst that shocked the people who heard it, carried a version of this sentiment at its core. I can't live here anymore. 5 words from a man in a maximum security cell. 5 words that on the surface sound like anguish, like a breaking point, like someone finally confronting the reality of what his life has become. But here's the question that every forensic psychologist, every legal analyst, and every investigator who has studied this case would ask you to sit with. Who is he saying it for? Because Christopher Watts has demonstrated repeatedly and without ambiguity that he is a man who performs his interior life for an audience. He performed grief on his front lawn. He performed cooperation for investigators while lying. He performed remorse for his father. He performed the truth in a prison interview room only after every lie had already been dismantled. And now he is performing suffering. Not because the suffering isn't real. 7 years in a maximum security facility, isolated, deteriorating, hated by other inmates. That is real. That is genuinely hard. But the performance of that suffering, the phone calls, the outburst, the words that shocked everyone, they serve a purpose. They position Christopher Watts as a victim. They generate sympathy. They invite the world to look at him and feel something other than contempt. And that is the most dangerous thing about Christopher Watts in 2025 and 2026. Not that he is suffering, but that he is still managing how the world perceives him. I need you to hold on, because what he has been writing in those prison letters takes everything we just talked about and makes it even darker. The letters, the Bible verses, the women, the claim that will stop you cold. Stay right here, and right now like this video and subscribe to the Crime Narrator. If you have been here since the beginning, thank you. This community is everything. Drop your country in the comments below. Every single flag. I want to see the whole world down there. While Christopher Watts was telling people he could not live inside those walls, he was also writing letters, extensively, to women he had never met, women who had reached out to him through the prison mail system, drawn by true crime coverage and morbid curiosity, and in some cases genuine belief that he was misunderstood. Those letters have been reported on by the Daily Mail, People, and multiple investigative outlets since 2022. What they contain is not what remorse looks like. In letters that span several pages each, handwritten, littered with Bible verses, Christopher Watts has constructed an entirely new identity for himself. One built on the language of evangelical faith, divine forgiveness, and spiritual renewal. He wrote, I am a new man. I am not the person who committed those horrible acts. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, If any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. That's me. I'm a new creature. He continued, I know that God does not see me as a sinner who killed his family. He sees me as his child. God does not see him as a sinner who killed his family, Shanann, Bella, Celeste, Nico, the wife he strangled in their bedroom, the daughters he drove to an oil field in the dark, the son who never had the chance to take a single breath outside his mother's body. He does not see himself as the man who did those things. He sees himself as a new creature, a child of God, someone who has been spiritually reborn into a self that bears no responsibility for what the old self did. And in letters written in October 2025, 7 full years after the murders, he took it one step further. He compared his imprisonment to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. He wrote that God had a plan for him, that being in prison was God's will, just as it was God's will for Jesus to die, that his trials had given him a glimpse of what Christ endured. Around those same letters, he managed his romantic correspondences with the same careful tone. He told one woman that in a different time he would have been with her, that God had other plans for his life now. A man serving 5 consecutive life sentences, managing multiple pen-pal relationships, comparing himself to Jesus, grieving his own imprisonment, while Shanann's parents wake up every morning without their daughter, while Frank and Sandra Razuchek carry the weight of what was taken from them in the early hours of August 13, 2018, while Frank Jr. fights, publicly and relentlessly, to make sure his sister's name is not swallowed by the story of the man who killed her. Forensic psychologists who have studied the Watts case extensively have identified a consistent psychological architecture underneath all of it. The affair, the murders, the performance of grief, the confession that kept changing, and now the letters. Christopher Watts is what criminologists classify as a family annihilator. Men, typically in their 30s, typically with no prior criminal record, typically presenting as dependable and unremarkable, who reach a point of complete internal rupture and make the catastrophic decision that destroying their family is preferable to facing the consequences of the life they have built. What sets Watts apart, even within that grim category, as noted by former FBI profiler Candace DeLong, is what he did after. Most family annihilators die by suicide following the murders. The internal collapse is total and final. Chris Watts did not. He showered. He texted his girlfriend. He stood on his front lawn with dry eyes and appealed for the safe return of the people he had just buried in an oil field. He believed he could survive it. He believed he could manage it. He believed that with the right story, with the right performance, with enough composure and enough deflection, he might walk away. And when the world did find out, he constructed a new version, one where Shanann was the killer, one where he was the grieving father, one designed to generate enough sympathy to give him a softer landing. It didn't work. And now, inside Dodge Correctional Institution, he is running the final version, the one where he is suffering, the one where God has a plan, the one where the old Chris Watts is gone and a new creature has taken his place. It is the most sophisticated version he has ever constructed, because this time, unlike the previous versions, no investigator can disprove it. There is no polygraph for spiritual transformation. There is no camera footage that contradicts a Bible verse. He has found the one story no one can definitively call a lie. It removes agency. It removes accountability. It transforms a man who made deliberate, premeditated choices to murder 4 people into a man who has been chosen by God for a difficult path, and that is exactly what Christopher Watts has always needed. While Christopher Watts writes letters about his spiritual rebirth and tells people he cannot live inside those walls, Shanann's parents are still living inside what he did. Frank and Sandra Ruzukek lost their daughter, both of their grandchildren, and an unborn grandson in the same night. They lost every version of the future that those children would have inhabited. Bella's first day at school, Celeste's teenage years, Nico's first steps, all of it erased in the early morning hours of August 13, 2018. Shanann's brother, Frank Jr., has been the loudest and most consistent voice in pushing back against the narratives that would center Chris Watts at the expense of his sister. He has spoken publicly, and he has been clear. Shanann was not a supporting character in this story. She was the story. The girls were the story. What happened to them is the story. The house at 2825 Saratoga Trail, the address that became synonymous with this case, sat unsold for years. It was listed in April 2024 at $775,000. The history of the property weighed against every offer. It finally sold in October 2024 at a significantly discounted price of $650,000. A family lives there now. In 2020, Netflix released American Murder, The Family Next Door, a documentary built almost entirely from Shanann's own social media posts, videos and text messages, no actors, no reconstructions, just Shanann herself in her own voice, telling the world exactly who she was and what she loved. It became one of the most watched true crime documentaries the platform has ever released. Because Shanann Watts was exactly who she said she was. She showed the world every part of her life, and the world, seeing her finally and fully, understood what had been taken. Christopher Watts turned 40 in May 2025. He will turn 41, 42, 50, every birthday inside Dodge Correctional Institution. His outburst. His "I can't live here." His letters about spiritual suffering and divine calling and the unbearable isolation. None of it has changed anything. There is no appeal in motion. There is no legal mechanism that could bring him back into a courtroom. The guilty plea holds, the 5 life sentences hold, the walls hold. He works as a custodian, he attends Bible study. He writes letters. He avoids eye contact in the corridors. He deteriorates slowly, in the way that bodies and minds deteriorate when confined without end. And he keeps performing, because Christopher Watts without an audience is not something he has yet learned to be. But here's the truth that outlasts every performance. Shanann Watts documented her life with love, and that documentation outlasted her. Her voice is on tape, her laugh is on video. Her girls are visible in hundreds of moments that Shanann chose to share with the world, because she believed ordinary moments were worth preserving. She was right, and Christopher Watts, for all his letters, all his Bible verses, all his "I can't live here," will be remembered not for his suffering, not for his spiritual journey, not for the person he claims to have become. He will be remembered for what he did on August 13th, 2018. For Shanann's shoes by the door, for Bella's last words, for Celeste's blanket, for Nico, who never had the chance to exist outside of the mother who carried him. He cannot outlast her. Shanann Watts was 34 years old, Bella Watts was 4, Celeste Watts was 3, Nico Watts was never born. Say their names. I come back to this case, and I know many of you come back to this case, not because of him. I want to be clear about that. We do not return to this story because of Christopher Watts. We return to it because of her. Because Shanann Watts was real and present and vivid and full, and the world saw her, and loved what it saw, and cannot reconcile what was done to her with the image of the man who did it. That is why this case will not close. That is why every letter from that prison cell generates headlines. That is why we are still here, 7 years later, making sure her name is spoken first. The walls of Dodge Correctional Institution are the most honest answer the justice system has ever given Christopher Watts. And every phone call, every letter, every outburst, every Bible verse, they cannot move those walls. They cannot unlock those doors. They cannot give him back a single hour of the future he destroyed. The sentence is permanent. The truth is permanent. And Shanann's voice, on those videos, in those texts, in the documentary that the whole world watched, that is permanent too. He cannot outlast her. If this case means something to you, if you believe Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico deserve to be remembered, share this video right now. That is the most powerful thing you can do. And like this video, and subscribe to the Crime Narrator if you are not already part of this community. We are here every week, going deep into the cases that matter. Drop your country in the comments right now, every single one of you. I want to see every flag, every city, every corner of the world that the Crime Narrator has reached. You are not just a viewer. You are this community. Show me where you are.